My name is Arthur Pendleton, and for most of my 57 years, I've lived here in Port Blossom, a town nestled in the embrace of the Pacific Northwest. Our home sits on a bluff overlooking the Salish Sea, where the air is a constant blend of salt, pine, and damp earth. From my study window, I can watch the ferries glide like silent, graceful giants across the gray-green water, their lights little constellations in the perpetual twilight of a winter's afternoon. I own a business my father started, Crestwood Timber and Mill. It's a legacy of sawdust and the scent of cedar, of sturdy things built to last. I've always believed in things that last, in solid foundations, in deep roots, in the enduring strength of family. But life, I've learned, has a way of testing the very foundations you believe to be unshakable. And no one can test them quite like your own child. This story is about my daughter, Lily. It's a difficult story to tell, not because I seek judgment or validation, but because laying the words out, one by one, is like trying to reassemble the fragments of a shattered mirror. You see all the pieces, you remember the whole, but you know it will never be the same again. And in the telling, you risk cutting yourself on the edges. It began, as so many tragedies do, with a moment of profound joy. Lily, my beautiful, volatile, brilliant daughter, was getting married. At 27, she had found a young man named Leo, a kind and steady architect who seemed to ground her whirlwind energy. When she announced their engagement over a rare family dinner, her eyes, the same deep green as the forest after a rain, shone with a light I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. My wife, Ilara, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her touch was, as always, a quiet anchor in the often turbulent sea of my emotions. Ilara is my second wife, a woman of immense grace and quiet strength. She is an artist, a painter whose canvases are filled with the soft, diffused light of our coastal landscape. She sees the beauty in weathered wood and bruised skies, and for years, she has tried to teach me to do the same. "We're so happy for you, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears of relief and happiness. Lily had not been an easy child. Her path had been a winding, often treacherous one, and for years, I had worried. To see her here, so full of hope, felt like watching the sun break through the clouds after a week of storms. Leo, ever polite, spoke about their plans. They were saving, but a wedding, the kind they dreamed of, felt financially out of reach. Lily's expression clouded over for a moment, the familiar shadow of anxiety creeping back into her eyes. I didn't hesitate. It was a father's instinct, a deep, primal urge to pave the way, to smooth the path for my child. "Don't you worry about that," I said, my voice perhaps a little too loud in my eagerness. "Consider it my wedding gift to you both. Whatever you need. Let's give you the wedding you deserve." The light returned to Lily's face, brighter than before. She launched into a description of her dream venue, the glass house at Silver Creek, a stunning conservatory set amidst old-growth forest, a place where the line between inside and out was beautifully blurred. It was expensive, ridiculously so, but in that moment, all I could think of was her happiness. I saw it as an investment not just in a day, but in a future I so desperately wanted for her, a future of stability, love, and peace. For the next few months, our lives were a flurry of happy activity. Ilara, with her impeccable taste, helped Lily choose color palettes. I met with the caterers and the venue manager, writing checks with a sense of profound satisfaction. I was building something for my daughter, a perfect day to launch her into a perfect life. I chose to ignore the small, disquieting signs, the way Lily would only call me when she needed a payment approved, the way conversations with Ilara were always polite but brief, the subtle wall that remained firmly in place. I told myself it was just wedding stress. I was a father helping his daughter, and that was all that mattered. The first tremor that shook my carefully constructed world came about 2 weeks before the wedding. My brother, Robert, who lives in Oregon, called to say his flight was booked, but he wanted to confirm the time of the rehearsal dinner. I realized I hadn't seen a final schedule. I'll just call the wedding planner, I told him. Mr. Albright. A very efficient fellow. I dialed the number, expecting a quick, cheerful confirmation. Instead, what I got was a hesitant pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Pendleton, Mr. Albright said, his voice strained. I'm afraid I can't add anyone to the guest list at this point. We're at capacity, and the seating chart is finalized. Oh, it's not an addition, I chuckled. It's my brother, Robert. He's the bride's uncle. I'm sure he's on there. I probably just misplaced my copy of the list. Another silence, longer this time. It stretched uncomfortably, filled with an unspoken static that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Could you do me a favor, Mr. Albright, and just email me the final list? I want to make sure all our family is accounted for. Sir, he said, and the formality felt like a shield. I'm not at liberty to do that. My instructions from the bride were very specific. The guest list is not to be shared. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Mr. Albright, I said, my voice losing its warmth. I am the father of the bride. I am also the one paying your invoices, and the invoices for the venue, the caterer, and the florist. I am not asking you as a casual observer. I am asking you as your client. Please send me the list. I could hear the soft exhale of his breath over the phone. He was a man caught in the middle, and I felt a brief pang of sympathy for him. But the cold knot in my gut was tightening, overriding everything else. I understand, sir, he finally whispered. I will send it over. Please check your email in a few minutes. The email arrived with a quiet ping that sounded like a verdict. I clicked it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrolled through the names, a collection of Lily's friends from college, colleagues from her new job, Leo's extensive and welcoming family. I saw names I recognized, and many I did not. I scrolled to the bottom, then back to the top. I used the search function. P. Pendleton. A. Pendleton. Nothing. My name was not on the list. Alara's name was not on the list. It was an absence so absolute, so profound, it felt like a physical blow. I stood up from my desk, my legs unsteady, and walked to the window overlooking the sea. The water was a turbulent gray, mirroring the chaos that had just erupted inside me. It couldn't be a mistake. A mistake is a typo, a missed invitation in the mail. This was a deliberate, surgical removal. I called Mr. Albright back, my hand trembling. There seems to be an error, I said, my voice a strained whisper. My wife and I were not on the list. This time, there was no hesitation. Just a deep, weary sadness in his voice. Mr. Pendleton, I am so sorry. There is no mistake. I was specifically instructed by Lily not to include you or Mrs. Pendleton. She also provided the security team at the venue with your photographs and instructions that you were not to be admitted under any circumstances. He said more, something about an email chain he could forward if I needed proof, but the words dissolved into a meaningless buzz. The receiver felt heavy, cold, an instrument of unbelievable cruelty. I hung up without another word. The knot in my stomach had turned to ice, spreading through my veins, chilling me to the bone. She didn't just not want me there. She was going to have me barred, like a trespasser, like an enemy. For a day, I did nothing. I moved through my house like a ghost, the beauty of Alara's paintings and the familiar comfort of our home offering no solace. The joy of the past few months had curdled into a sickening poison. Every check I had written, every happy conversation, now felt like a scene from a fool's play. I called Lily. Her phone went straight to voicemail, her recorded voice a cheerful, breezy sound that was a mockery of the coldness I now knew she was capable of. Hey, you've reached Lily. Leave a message. I learned later she was at her bachelorette party, celebrating with the very friends whose names were on the list from which I had been exiled. The next day, I drove to her apartment in the city. The rain was lashing down, the wipers on my car swishing a frantic, hypnotic rhythm that matched the turmoil in my mind. I needed to see her face. I needed to hear it from her. A part of me, the foolish, ever-hopeful father, still clung to the possibility of a monstrous misunderstanding. She opened the door a crack, her face a mask of impatience. She was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair piled messily on her head. She looked like my little girl, and for a second, my resolve wavered. "Dad? I can't talk. I'm swamped with last-minute stuff," she said, her tone clipped. She didn't open the door any wider. "I need to talk to you, Lily," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's important." A flicker of understanding, or perhaps annoyance, crossed her features. "Albright called you, didn't he? He told me he might." There was no surprise, no shame. Just a flat acknowledgement. "He told me I'm not invited to my own daughter's wedding," I said, the words tasting like ash. "The wedding I'm paying for." She sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Well, good. Now you know. It saves you the drive up to Silver Creek. I'll send you some pictures when I get a chance." The casual cruelty of it, the sheer, breathtaking indifference, shattered the last of my composure. The ice in my veins cracked, and a hot, searing wave of anger and grief washed over me. I felt my eyes burn, and to my eternal shame, tears began to stream down my face. I, a man who prided himself on his stoicism, stood crying on my daughter's doorstep in the pouring rain. "Why?" I choked out. "Lily, for God's sake, why? What have I done to deserve this?" For the first time, her mask slipped, and I saw the raw, festering anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. "What have you done?" she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You've always done it. You've always chosen her over me. You shoved her into my life, into my mother's house, and you expected me to be happy about it. You always took her side, you always defended her. You wanted me to be a perfect, happy family with a woman I can't stand." "That's not true," I whispered, horrified. "Alara has only ever been kind to you. And I have always defended you, Lily. Even when you were wrong. The trouble at school, the pills. I got you into college when no one else would take you. I was there. I have always been there for you." "Defended me?" She laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "You sent me away to live with Aunt Carol. You made me feel like a problem to be managed. And you want a medal for getting me into college? You owed me that. You owe me everything for what you did to my life when you married her." The word hung in the air between us. "Owed! And now you're bringing all this negativity to my door, 2 days before my wedding," she said, her voice rising. "I don't have time for your emotional drama." She started to close the door. "I'm paying for that wedding, Lily," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. The tears had stopped. The grief had receded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "It's the least you can do," she shot back. "You owe me." With that, she closed the door in my face. I stood there for a long moment, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoing the final, brutal severing of something I had once held sacred. I drove home in a daze. The rain had stopped, but the world looked gray and washed out. I walked into the house and found Alara in her studio, the scent of turpentine and oil paint filling the air. She was standing before a large canvas, a seascape of churning, violent waves under a sliver of hopeful light. She turned as I entered, and one look at my face was all it took. Her own face, usually a portrait of serenity, crumpled with concern. I told her everything. The words tumbled out, a torrent of pain and disbelief. I collapsed into a paint-spattered armchair and cried, not the quiet tears of a heartbroken father, but the racking, gut-wrenching sobs of a man who has reached his absolute limit. Alara came and knelt before me. She didn't offer platitudes or easy comforts. She just listened, her hand a warm, steady presence on my knee. When I had finally cried myself out, my voice a raw rasp, she looked at me, her dark eyes filled with a fierce, protective light I had rarely seen. "Arthur," she said, her voice soft but firm. "For years, I have watched you give every piece of yourself to her. I have watched you absorb her anger, excuse her cruelty, and finance her life, all in the hope that one day she would love you back on your terms. I have always counseled patience, but this is not about patience anymore. This is about respect. Not just for you, but for me and for our life together. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sea. There is a point where love without boundaries becomes a form of self-destruction. We cannot set ourselves on fire to keep her warm, my love. She has made her choice. She wants the gift, but not the giver. It's time we respected her choice. What are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. I am saying, she turned back to me, her expression resolute, that a gift given with love cannot be accepted with contempt. She does not see this as a gift. She sees it as a debt you owe her. So, we must treat it as such. And a debt can be rescinded when the terms of the contract are violated. Her words, spoken with such calm clarity, cut through my fog of grief. She wasn't encouraging revenge. She was encouraging self-preservation. She was drawing a line in the sand that I had been too afraid, or too full of misguided hope, to draw for myself. That evening, I sat at my desk, the same desk where I had so joyfully signed checks for Lily's perfect day. I pulled up the contract for the glass house at Silver Creek. I read the cancellation clause. The deposit, a staggering sum, was non-refundable. I didn't care. With a steady hand, I composed an email. I explained that due to unforeseen and irreconcilable family circumstances, the event scheduled for Saturday was canceled, effective immediately. I pressed send. The click of the mouse was a quiet, definitive sound. A foundation had been tested, and it had crumbled. And I was finally, painfully, beginning to build a new one. The day of the wedding arrived with an almost cruel beauty. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the sun sparkled on the surface of the water. In our house, a profound quiet reigned. We didn't speak of it. We didn't have to. The air was thick with the unspoken. I imagined the scene at Silver Creek, the caterers arriving with their vans, the florists with their riot of blooms, the wedding planner, Mr. Albright, trying to direct a symphony that had no orchestra. I pictured them being met by a polite but firm security guard, a flash of an email, the confusion turning to panic. I felt a pang of guilt, a deep, uncomfortable churning in my gut. This was my daughter, my only child. I was actively, consciously, destroying what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But then I would remember the coldness in her voice, the click of the deadbolt, the words, "You owe me," and the guilt would recede, replaced by a grim, sorrowful certainty. This wasn't a lesson in cruelty. It was a lesson in consequences. A lesson I had failed to teach her for 27 years. The phone began to ring around noon. Leo's parents. A furious aunt. A confused cousin. We didn't answer. Then, Lily's number flashed on my screen, again and again. I looked at the phone, then at Alara, who was quietly tending to her orchids by the window. She met my gaze, her expression unreadable but steady. I silenced the phone and then, with a deep breath, I blocked the number. A moment later, I went to the security panel by the door and revoked her access code to the gate. It felt final, a digital severing to match the emotional one. The full story of what transpired came to me later, in pieces. The wedding planner, having been shown the cancellation email by the venue, had called Lily in a panic. She and Leo had arrived at the glass house to find the gates locked. There was, I was told, a terrible scene. Lily, in her wedding dress, screaming at the guards, trying to climb the fence before Leo pulled her back, just as someone threatened to call the police. Humiliation. Chaos. A dream turned into a public nightmare. She drove to our house, of course. We heard her car at the gate, the furious, repeated buzzing of the intercom. We sat in the living room, silent, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor. I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollowed out, as if I had scooped out a part of myself and thrown it away. I was not hiding from her rage. I was protecting what was left of my peace. My own parents called that evening. They were gentle, loving people in their late 70s who had always doted on Lily, often shielding her from the consequences of her actions. My father's voice was full of disappointment. "Arthur, your mother and we don't understand this," he said. "To ruin your own daughter's wedding? No matter what she did, she is your child. You cannot be this ruthless with your own blood." "Dad," I said, my voice weary, "you don't know the whole story. She didn't just not invite us. She arranged to have us barred, like criminals. She told me I owed her this wedding. She has been cruel to Alara for 14 years. There is a point where you have to stop enabling the cruelty." I then told him about my decision, long overdue, to cancel the credit card I had been paying for since she was in college. It was a small thing, mostly unused now that she had a job, but it was another tie, another symbol of the unhealthy dynamic I was determined to end. They didn't understand, not yet. Their love for their granddaughter was a soft, forgiving thing. A week later, heartbroken for Lily, they drove to her apartment, offering to help pay for a small, simple ceremony to make things right. They were met with a firestorm. Lily, raw and furious, turned her wrath on them. She accused them of being my spies, of being complicit in my betrayal. She dredged up the past, blaming them for telling me about her drug use in high school, something they had never done. I'd found out from a teacher. She screamed at them, these two elderly people who had only ever shown her love, and told them to get out of her life and never come back. My father called me that night. His voice was different. The disappointment was gone, replaced by a quiet, shaken sorrow. "You were right, son," he said, his voice cracking. "We tried. Lord, we tried. But the hate in that girl, it's like a poison. You did the right thing. You have to protect yourselves." Hearing those words from him, the last bastion of unconditional support for Lily, something inside me shifted. The last vestiges of my guilt evaporated, replaced by a profound, aching sadness. The problem wasn't just me. The problem wasn't just Alara. The poison, as my father called it, was in Lily herself. And it was destroying everyone who tried to get close. To understand the depth of this chasm, you have to understand its origins. Lily's mother, my first wife, left when Lily was 7. She fell in love with a friend, and they decided to move to Europe. They didn't want a child disrupting their new life. It was a clean break, brutal and absolute. I was granted full custody because she didn't contest it. She simply walked away from her daughter. I have not heard from her since. For 5 years, it was just Lily and me. I poured all my energy into being both parents, into trying to fill the massive, gaping hole her mother had left in her life. When Lily was 13, I met Alara. I had been lonely for a long time, and Alara's quiet strength, her artistic soul, her gentle wisdom, it was like water in a desert. She came from humble beginnings, her family had struggled, and she had built her life from scratch, earning a master's degree and becoming a respected artist. She was a self-made woman of incredible substance. Lily saw none of this. She saw a usurper, a replacement. And as she got older and her teenage friends whispered poison in her ear, she saw a gold digger. Why else would a beautiful woman marry a divorced man 12 years older than her? She'd once screamed at me. "She wants your money. She wants my inheritance." The accusation was ludicrous. Alara had her own successful career. Our home, our life, was a partnership. But the narrative took root in Lily's mind, a convenient container for all her rage and pain over her mother's abandonment. Alara became the target. Our marriage became the betrayal. Her teenage years were a nightmare. The sullen silences, the vicious arguments, the way she would look right through Alara as if she didn't exist. It became so toxic that, for a year, I sent her to live with my sister, hoping the company of her cousin would help. It ended with my sister calling me in tears, saying she couldn't handle the constant fighting and negativity. Then came the high school years with my parents, the lies, the sneaking out, the pills. College was a blur of rehab stints and academic probation, a constant state of crisis that I navigated with my checkbook and my connections, always bailing her out, always fixing her mistakes. All the while, Alara stood by me, a beacon of patience. "She's hurting, Arthur," she would say. "Her anger is a shield. One day, she will see past it." But she never did. The shield became a fortress, and we were permanently on the outside, looking in. Life settled into a new, quiet rhythm. A year passed. The raw wound of the wedding fiasco began to scar over. Alara's garden flourished. My business thrived. We found a fragile peace in our quiet life, the two of us against the backdrop of the sea and the sky. I rarely thought about Lily, or at least, I tried not to. The pain was still there, a dull ache in a place I couldn't quite reach. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. "Mr. Pendleton," a man's voice asked. "It's Leo, Lily's husband." My heart seized. "Leo, is she all right? Has something happened?" She's fine, physically," he said, his voice heavy. "But I needed to talk to you. I'm in Port Blossom for a few days for work. I was wondering if you might have time to meet." A wild, foolish hope surged in my chest. A reconciliation. Maybe Lily was ashamed. Maybe she had sent Leo as an emissary to broker a peace. After all, I am a father. The door to my heart, I realized, had never truly been locked. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. The air smelled of roasted beans and rain. Leo looked older than I remembered, the easy smile gone, replaced by a deep weariness in his eyes. He was alone. "Where's Lily?" I asked, the hope already beginning to fade. He stirred his coffee, staring into the dark liquid. "We separated a month ago," he said softly. "I've moved out." He proceeded to tell me a story that was tragically familiar. A story of unpredictable rages over the smallest things, of thrown objects and broken plates, of constant, bitter accusations. He had been promoted, which required them to move to a new city a few hours away. Lily had found a comparable job there, but she never forgave him for taking her away from her home. He described her inability to take responsibility for anything, her talent for twisting every situation until she was the victim and he was the villain. "I loved her so much," he said, looking up at me, his eyes glistening. "But it was like living with a ghost. The real Lily was buried under so much anger. I couldn't reach her. And eventually I had to save myself." Then he did something I never expected. He apologized. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I stood by and watched how she treated you and Alara. I let her convince me that you were the problem. I saw the red flags, but I chose to ignore them because I loved her. I helped enable it, and I am truly sorry for the pain it caused you." "It wasn't your fault, Leo," I said, my own voice hoarse. "It was mine, perhaps. For not teaching her boundaries sooner. For always fixing things instead of letting her face the consequences." We sat in silence for a moment, two men bound by our love for a woman we couldn't seem to help. "There's one more thing," Leo said, leaning forward. "She's not doing well. Since I left, she's been distraught. She's alone. Her temper has driven away every friend she's ever had. She has no one. I know I have no right to ask, but could you check on her? She needs help, Arthur. She needs therapy. She needs her father." His words were a spear to my heart. Despite everything, despite the slammed doors and the hateful words, she was my little girl. And she was alone and in pain. I found her address in the new city. I drove there the next day, my mind a storm of apprehension and a fragile, renewed hope. I would not be angry. I would not dredge up the past. I would be a father. I would offer help. She opened the door and stared at me as if I were an apparition. I had brought Alara with me, we were a team, but seeing my wife's face, Lily's expression hardened into a familiar mask of contempt. "What do you want?" Lily, honey, I began gently. Leo called me. He's worried about you. We're worried about you. It was the wrong thing to say. The mention of Leo's name was a spark on dry tinder. An inferno of rage erupted from her. All her pain, her loneliness, her fury at Leo for leaving her, it all came pouring out, directed at the two people standing on her doorstep. You, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Alara. This is your fault. All of it. You ruined my life. I hate you so much I could kill you. She turned to me, her eyes wild. And you? You brought her here? After everything? You chose her over me at my wedding, and you're choosing her over me now. You're the reason my marriage failed. You're the reason for everything wrong in my life. Lily, please, I begged, holding up my hands as if to ward off the verbal blows. We're just here to help. I'll pay for a therapist, whatever you need. We can get through this. I don't want your help, she screamed, her voice cracking with sobs. I don't want you. I was ashamed of you. Ashamed to have my friends meet my father who married that woman. That's why you weren't at my wedding. I never want to see either of you again. She slammed the door. This time, the sound didn't break me. It just filled me with a vast, empty sadness. We had tried. We had offered an open hand, and it had been slapped away. We drove home in silence, the miles stretching between us and my broken, furious daughter. I didn't know what else to do. You cannot force someone to accept a lifeline. It was Alara, in her infinite wisdom, who found the last key. A few days later, she came to me in my study. Arthur, she said softly, there is one person we haven't tried. One person Lily never pushed away. She was talking about Chloe, Lily's best friend from childhood. Their families had been our neighbors, and the girls had been inseparable until Chloe's family moved to South Africa when they were in their late teens. They had kept in touch, the one stable friendship in Lily's tumultuous life. With a heavy heart, I found Chloe on social media. I wrote her a long, painful message explaining everything. I laid my heart bare, telling her of Lily's failed marriage, her isolation, our failed attempt to help. I asked for nothing more than for her to reach out to her old friend. Chloe wrote back within hours. She was heartbroken to hear the news, but promised she would try. Weeks turned into a month. I heard nothing. I had resigned myself to the fact that I had done all I could. My love for my daughter would have to be a distant, silent thing. I had to let her go, for my own sanity and for Alara's peace. Then, one Sunday, my parents came for lunch. They were quiet, their expressions gentle. We heard from Lily, my mother said, placing her hand on mine. I steeled myself for another story of anger and rejection. She came to see us yesterday, my father added, his voice soft. She apologized for how she treated us. She said she's been in therapy, that a friend convinced her to go. He looked at me. She said she knows her hatred grew into something ugly, something she couldn't control. I felt a profound, seismic shift inside me. A crack in the fortress. A glimmer of light. And me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did she say anything about me? My father's eyes were full of a sad, loving pity. She said she's not ready. She said she still blames you. She said she may never be able to forgive you, Arthur. And here is the strange, unexpected truth. The words didn't hurt. Not anymore. I felt no anger, no resentment. Only a quiet, deep, and abiding peace. My daughter was getting help. She was taking the first, tentative steps on a long road toward healing. She was learning to see the poison inside her. And if, for her to heal, she needs to see me as the source of her pain, then so be it. A father's love, I am learning, is not always about being present. Sometimes it is about having the strength to step away, to allow your child the space they need to find themselves, even if they never find their way back to you. I don't despise her anymore. I don't feel the need for her apology or her forgiveness. My love for her exists, quiet and constant, like the sea outside my window. But it no longer dictates my own happiness. My life is here in this house, with my wise and wonderful wife. It is in the scent of cedar at the mill and the feel of damp earth in Alara's garden. I have found my own peace. I have learned to respect myself, to draw boundaries not of anger, but of self-preservation. I have done all I can. And now, all I can do is wish her well on her journey and hope that one day she finds a peace of her own, even if I am not a part of it.